Imagine sitting in a room where decisions are being made that could affect millions, and no one seems to understand what's actually happening. This is exactly the chaos that erupted today as Senator Smith stood up, eyes blazing, demanding answers from Pete Hegseth on proposed cuts, saying bluntly, "Nobody on this committee knows what that means." The tension was electric, the questions sharp, and the room froze as transparency, or the lack of it, was put under a microscope. What are these cuts really about? Who stands to gain and who will suffer? Stick around, because what happened next could change everything you thought you knew about this debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And I'll start with three substantial notes of agreement. One, we do face an incredibly complex threat environment. We face Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, various other terrorist organizations working together against American interests in a way we have never seen before, and with an economy like China's that we've never seen before. It's going to be very difficult to meet those challenges. Second, innovation is incredibly important and crucial to that. The changes in warfare are happening at a more rapid pace than I think we've ever seen before. We have to innovate more quickly, and I appreciate your leadership on getting after acquisition reform, because what's absolutely true is the Pentagon is not ready for this right now, and certainly that predates this Secretary of Defense and this administration. It's a problem that we need to get after, to do the acquisition reform so that we can get the materials that we need quickly. Innovate more quickly. We've got a lot of good ideas in this committee. Look forward to working with the administration on trying to get that done. Second, the budget is a major problem. It is simply unacceptable that we are this late in the year and we do not have a budget. That's the basics of how you plan to do all of that. And this is but the culmination of a series of problems. We had a CR for FY25, largely at the insistence of President Trump. And then, by the time we did pass a budget, it was just a CR. And now we're on a path again towards a CR in FY26. There is no budget transparency and no plan that we can see. And what we have seen happening at the Pentagon in the interim is also very disturbing and without explanation. There's been talk about 8% cuts across the board. Nobody on this committee knows what that means. Some of it is happening. It has not been made transparent to us. Is it going to make us better? Is it part of a larger strategy? Nobody really knows. We also heard the plan to cut 20% of the flag officers. Again, no strategy, no plan. This is why the budget is so important. The budget can inform all of this. Maybe that's a good idea, but we have no idea because there is no transparency and no follow-through. Also, quite disturbingly, within the Department of Defense and also across the federal government, the one and only criteria that is consistent is loyalty to Trump, as opposed to loyalty to the law or loyalty to the Constitution. This started with one of the more shameful events in DoD history, and that's when we pulled security details from former members of the Pentagon who faced security threats. Why were those security details pulled? They weren't pulled because anything told us that they were safe. Chairman Milley is one great example. He was on the threat list because he carried out an order from President Trump, and rightfully so, to kill Soleimani in the Middle East. He's now on Iran's hit list, and we pulled his security detail, leaving him and his family vulnerable. Why? Because he had the audacity to say something critical of President Trump. I mean, that's just embarrassing. If you told me 10 years ago on this committee that something like that would have happened, I wouldn't have believed you. And now we have a dictate from the White House saying that all federal employees will be tested for whether or not they are supportive of President Trump. New York Times had a great headline on that saying, why does an air traffic controller have to be a Trump supporter? Well, I would ask, why does an acquisition professional have to be a Trump supporter? If you're focused on loyalty, you're not focused on competency, you're not focused on ability, and it is the wrong way to go. Even within the budget, we see the influence of the president over the influence of common sense. We've all heard about the Golden Dome. When I first heard about the Golden Dome, it was interesting because it reminded me of a joke I first told about 12 years ago when we were dealing with a large number of Pentagon programs that were more ambitious than practical. Future combat systems, the expeditionary fighting vehicle. You know, basically they had, well, this is what we want. And we had this joke that, well, all I want is sharks with freaking laser beams attached to them. That became the armed services thing. I actually have a little plastic shark that my staff made for me with a laser beam attached to it. Making the perfect the enemy of the good is a problem. And nobody on this committee knows what Golden Dome is. And the other thing that's really important about this, contained within that is one of the most important national security threats that we face, missile defense and counter-drone. We have a lot of programs that people are working on in that direction. What happens to those programs when we take $25 billion towards a project that no one can explain and no one can understand? And again, we don't have a budget, so we're taking it on faith. That is deeply troubling. Equally troubling is the Air Force One airplane that we got from Qatar. There's all kinds of ethics problems with that, which I'll leave aside for the moment. But that airplane is going to have to be fitted to be Air Force One. It's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Again, no transparency. We're not told what that's going to cost and where it's going to go. But because President Trump wanted it, he gets it. Hundreds of millions of dollars goes out the window. We don't have the capacity to sort of say, sorry, sir, that's not a good idea. And the last one on this list is one that, frankly, I had a hard time believing when I first heard it. Apparently, the president has decided that the F-35 would be a better plane if it had 2 engines. And to a certain degree, it's hard to argue with. I guess 2 engines is better than 1, except that you can't just add a second engine to the F-35. This is a program that's taken us over 25 years, and we are, knock on wood, finally to the point where we're going to have the plane. Now, I would have thought this would have been dismissed, but I hear defense contractors, Pentagon, they're looking at this idea. It is okay to tell the boss that he's wrong. We all have dumb ideas. It's good to have people around us who have the capability and the competency to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're walking down the wrong direction. In terms of the global strategy, I substantially agree with the chairman, except that I fear that, America first does mean America alone. We've seen that in a number of different issues, certainly placing tariffs on absolutely every country in the world, irrespective of our relationships. Well, sorry, except for Russia. Didn't place tariffs on Russia. That alienates people. Cutting off foreign aid programs, which I realize is not the purview of the Department of Defense, but I'll remind you of something that Secretary Gates said before this committee. If you're going to cut off the State Department, you better give me more ammunition. The two things are related. We stopped programs that were feeding hungry children in Africa. Literally took food out of the mouths of hungry children. Why? Apparently because there were a couple of USAID programs that supported LGBTQ programs. Now, why we didn't just cut those instead of cutting the ones that were feeding hungry children in Africa, I don't know, but that really sends the wrong message to the rest of the world. And the last one, and once we get to the Q&As, I would be curious to hear what the Secretary has to say about this. Threatening to use military force to invade Greenland and Panama. I don't believe the president has actually threatened military force against Canada just yet. He's just threatened to annex it. So Denmark, Canada, Panama, 3 peaceful nations that we are allies with, or were anyway. The message that sends to the rest of the world is one that the U.S. is purely in it for itself and does not care about the rest of the world. And this has implications. We're trying to stop China. We are in a global competition with China. We have built up excellent partnerships across Asia over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, in Australia, in Japan, in India, and the Philippines. Largely, that was because China exercised economic coercion. They went ballistic on Australia for daring to suggest that China could be more transparent about COVID, and Australia recalculated. Now we are the ones using economic coercion on our partners and allies and pushing them away. And this filters back over to Ukraine, where I am in violent agreement with the chairman about how important Ukraine is to our national security interests. And I also agree with the secretary. We need to get peace in Ukraine. The longer that war continues, the more dangerous it is for everybody. But the administration made a crucial mistake at the start by showing weakness to Vladimir Putin and fundamentally misunderstood the war. Actually put out quotes that bought into the notion that Ukraine was somehow responsible for the war, even though Russia was the one who invaded. And Putin saw that signal. He saw that big green light and knew if he just waited a little while, we would abandon our allies, we would abandon our partners, and we would abandon Ukraine.
From the very first moment Senator Smith slammed her hand on the table, the room shifted, a sudden charge of tension cutting through the usual procedural calm. As her eyes locked on to Pete Hegseth with a mix of disbelief and demand, her voice sharp and commanding as she declared, "Nobody on this committee knows what that means." The simple words ignited a ripple through the chamber, and instantly, every glance, every hesitation, every subtle gesture became a signal, a story of human instinct under pressure. As Hegseth's practiced composure flickered for just a moment, revealing the natural unease of being confronted under the relentless gaze of accountability. The atmosphere was electric, thick with the kind of drama that feels cinematic, and it became clear that this was not just a hearing, but a theater of power, responsibility, and the human cost of bureaucratic ambiguity. As the questioning intensified, Smith methodically dissected the language of the proposed cuts, exposing inconsistencies and forcing the room to confront the gap between political messaging and practical reality. Each word, each pause, was analyzed not just for its content but for its subtext, the unspoken meanings lurking beneath carefully chosen phrases, revealing the pressure points where policy meets personality. Observing Hegseth, one could see the delicate balancing act, defending positions while navigating scrutiny, projecting authority while managing the natural instinct to evade uncomfortable truths. The exchanges were tense, a subtle chess match of language and perception, with every nuance telling a story about leadership, credibility, and the fragility of trust in public institutions. The human drama was as gripping as the policy debate itself. Micro expressions, subtle shifts in posture, the timing of responses all painted a vivid picture of instinct under pressure. Smith's determination was palpable. She leaned in, probed, pressed, and in doing so revealed more than the numbers ever could. She revealed the dynamics of accountability, the tension between responsibility and performance, and the psychological stakes inherent in decision-making at the highest levels. Hegseth's reactions, measured yet visibly constrained, offered a study in professional self-preservation, the quiet struggle to maintain composure while under a spotlight that demanded absolute transparency. In those moments, the committee chamber transformed into a stage where human instincts, political strategy, and ethical obligation collided, creating suspense and insight in equal measure. Beyond the immediate confrontation, the story resonated with anyone watching or following the proceedings. This was about more than one hearing, more than one committee, more than one set of proposed cuts. It was about the principles of accountability, the demand for clarity in governance, and the responsibility shared by leaders and citizens alike. Smith's insistence on transparency served as a mirror, reflecting the broader expectation that those in positions of power must be understood, must answer hard questions, and must justify decisions that carry real-world consequences. Every moment of hesitation, every evasive phrase, and every challenge to authority became part of a narrative about public trust and the vital importance of asking questions that matter. As the hearing drew to a close and the gavel fell, the lasting impression was not simply procedural or political, but profoundly human. Character revealed under pressure, instinct exposed in real time, and the stakes of governance laid bare for anyone willing to pay attention. It was a reminder that news is not just headlines or policy summaries. It is about watching leadership tested, understanding the tension between intention and execution, and recognizing the courage it takes to demand answers when clarity is scarce. For viewers, the message is clear. The drama, insight, and suspense of moments like these are why we must observe, analyze, and engage, because accountability is not abstract, it is immediate, personal, and essential. And in that room today, history, judgment, and public trust converged in a spectacle that demanded attention and reflection.